Okay, what have I learned as a designer that we really need to juggle? Success in a product requires that it be different enough to feel new and fresh, familiar enough for people to feel comfortable with it, smarter or more charming than its competitors, fully thought out in terms of its impact, worthwhile financially to all stakeholders, and fully equitable and inclusive. And that's something that we're all really learning so much about recently, and it's exciting. We're living in an exciting time of change and transition. It's really important for design to kind of meet the needs of its user group or its demographic or the niche that it's for. And design should serve its cultural and environmental context. So these are all sort of different designs for winter, for different settings and for different users. The 18th, 19th, and 20th and 21st centuries have witnessed intense growth and progress in mechanization and industrialization, but design is still catching up in many ways. I'm particularly interested in our relationship with technology, which is a force that designers can domesticate and train to be helpful or not. Does anyone recognize these three stills from movies? On the left is Metropolis from 1926 with the Maria robot. And on the upper right is Modern Times in 1936 with Charlie Chaplin. And then below that is Frankenstein, which was made in 1931, but based on a novel that was written by Mary Shelley in 1818. And I think they all are kind of about our grappling with our relationship with technology and the mechanized world. And we're still deciding whether we can trust it. This is from 2001, the movie.
Do you read me, Hal? Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
So 2001 obviously was not the first movie that, grappled with the idea of technology gone awry. As I pointed out in the other three movies from, the 20s and 30s. But there's a kind of a long and amazing history of these, like Minority Report from 2002 above there, and Ex Machina from 2014. So Edward O. Wilson, the American sociologist, in 2009, in a debate at Harvard, said the real problem of humanity is the following: we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And, I think that is really a question for designers, as well as sort of everyone else philosophically, because we were hunter-gatherers, sort of spearing animals for our survival for so many millions of years that we really haven't outgrown that in terms of the way that we behave and operate. And so how are we going to manage this as designers and as, futurists, I would say? Since the internal components of most products are no longer dictated by mechanical parts, but rather printed circuitry, which is almost identical for all products, regardless of their purpose and interface, designers now assign meaning to the form of their designs. This is an awesome creative opportunity. It's also a place where we can kind of get lost and end up doing stuff that is utterly meaningless. And so it's kind of our job to think about meaning. This is from Learning from Las Vegas, which was published in 1972 by Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown. And they were architects. But what I love about this is that it's all about how everything carries meaning, every little detail, as neutral or as plain Jane vanilla cliche as it might seem to us. It's all speaking in some way. And so our job as designers is not just to make our user group comfortable or make design that's appropriate to them or solves their pain point, but it's also to assign meaning to every form that we create. And so that's kind of like the fun part, but it's an extra job to think about. And we can kind of play with meaning these days, as is often done. So you can see that there's camouflage being used for baby clothes and lingerie, and the work boot style is here co-opted to make a dress boot. And that's just some of the kind of hip hop cultural appropriation that's part of our current era. To understand the relationship between form and content, I've developed a matrix, the 3 axes of design. Prosthesis, what I call prosthesis, is kind of about problem solving or making a product that's all about use and is transparent in its meaning. Aesthetics is everything about a design that makes it beautiful or that's interested in expressing something about its form. An icon is the way it tells a story or how it fits into our cultural context. Prosthesis is from the Greek root, which means replacement or addition. This captures the way designed things extend a user's agency with emphasis on its function. A prosthesis performs its purpose without making a statement. Like this pill camera that has a light and a camera that you swallow and can do essentially what an endoscopy and a colonoscopy could do, but without you having to go through a kind of a surgery. Or, putting technology into contact lenses. And if you want to take that a little further, you could say that staplers and wheelbarrows and all these kinds of products that are kind of anonymous products that just help us do our daily tasks are prostheses in the way that I'm defining it. This 4,800-year-old artificial eye was found in a tomb in Persia, well, now Iran. According to experts, this super ancient cyclops was a wealthy woman in her late 20s, probably royalty, which would explain why she had clay vessels and ornamental beads and a leather sack and bronze mirror in the grave with her. A Cal optometrist guesses that the woman wore the fake eyeball for aesthetic purposes, because what princess wants to wear an eye patch? So I really mean literal prostheses and also figurative ones. And of course, prostheses have come a long way since 4,800 years ago. Now let's take a look at this luge. And this is kind of what I mean by a prosthetic product. It's a product that's as minimal as could be and only kind of functions to extend the user's ability or body. Because honestly, a human being couldn't travel at this speed in like a luge chute without this device. Now, aesthetics is the beauty, the quality, or aggregate of qualities in a person or thing that pleasurably exalts the mind or spirit. Aesthetics is how any design object or system strives for visual appeal. And this is really about proportion and harmony and relationships. I really strongly feel that beauty arises primarily from the correct hierarchy between the elements. This really beautiful brooch was designed and created by René Lalique, one of my favorites from the turn of the century in France, turn of the last century. And then icon, from the Greek word meaning likeness. Icons tap into our devotion to ideals. They make a statement. They manifest the symbolic or the abstract. These are literal icons from art, but they're also design icons. This object in the upper left was created in 1993 by Italian designer and architect Guido Venturini for Alessi. It's called the Firebird Gaslighter, and it was the result of a design workshop that looked at objects' power and ability to inspire, intrigue, and amuse. Once a pop design icon, this erotically shaped sculpture has been redesigned after 30 years in gold for Harrods. And then, does anyone recognize the typewriter on the bottom left? That was the Valentine typewriter designed by Ettore Sottsass for Olivetti. And this was a time way before there was the availability of laptops. And he designed this to keep poets company on Sunday afternoons. And it was portable and whimsical and came with this carrying case with a handle, and was sort of the most, I guess, portable way to write if you weren't going to write, in a notebook. And of course, the Tesla, I think, is also kind of a modern icon. But there are many others. For example, all the streetwear that we all know and love. And these two shoes are both designed by Rick Owens, the fashion icon for Semmelhack. One of them they're from different times. They're separated by about 10 years. But I really, love the fact that sneakers have now merged with high fashion. Why not? Let's be comfortable and fashionable. And then these are LeBron James currency sneakers from 2019. They interpret inspiration drawn from global money systems. The sneakers flooded black knit upper is equipped with branded synthetic tongue and a marbled graphic on the heel. The theme is conveyed via monetary symbols in the insole and a green swoosh emblazoned on the counter stabilizer. These retailed for between $130 and $375. So I'd call them an icon. And they have a really cool sole. And these Michael Jordans were sold for almost $200,000 on auction. They were from 1984. So I guess they get a kind of halo effect from the fact that he actually wore them. This is from the North Face. Whoops. Sorry, not sure why that's not on. Try it again. So I wanted to just return to aesthetics for a second and talk about how all through history we've had so many different forms of aesthetic systems and sacred harmonies and geometries. And I just wanted to pull out a couple of them for you. I know Max and I talked about this. I hope we get to talk more about it soon, Max. But So you guys probably recognize these, the geometry of the pyramids and the golden section and the Vitruvian Man from Leonardo, and then the way that a Renaissance palazzo would be proportioned, and the fractal geometry, and all the science and art behind font design, and Chippendale, Le Corbusier's modulor, the De Stijl periods, proportioning systems, and so on. Every product has more or less of each of these qualities, and the best have them all. So like the De Chevaux, which is a car that came out post World War II in France, made by Citroën, was called the De Chevaux because it was only 2 horsepower, and it was a very minimalist car, and it just was for getting from point A to point B. And many of the parts were stocked at the local, corner stores. And it was sort of designed to be democratic, and everybody could afford it, and everybody could fix it, and everybody could get parts for it, even when things were scarce. So I would call that sort of the ultimate prosthesis. And then this beautiful aircraft designed by Luigi Colani in the 70s would be, for me, an example of aesthetics. And then the, rear, all the fantastic stuff going on behind the rear axle of any kind of late 50s Cadillac, with the fins and all of the alluring references to rockets and all kinds of stuff that were going on in car design by the late 50s, was for me very much an expression of icon. So these are now going to be a couple of examples of products that cover all of these. So these are from the 19th century. They're a combination of compasses, and they can also be used as sundials. And I think that this is really fascinating to think of like a pocketable orientation device. It's sort of the precursor for the modern smartphone that we all have in our pockets. So to me, they have all these decorative elements to them, as well as the utility of being small and pocketable and highly, highly useful. Armor, especially armor that is kind of impressive or expressive, I think does a lot of different things. It's sort of about announcing yourself and psyching out your enemies and referring to some mythical beast that you are, and also protecting you. So it's all three, I think. These amazing wheelchairs. On the left is Kawasaki's wheelchair. He's from 1984. This is a wheelchair-bound industrial designer who I think designed a really very futuristic for that era wheelchair. On the right is the carbon black wheelchair from Britain from 2012 by Andrew Slorence. Another really beautiful wheelchair, in my opinion. And I think that, anytime that you have all this advertising kind of merging with person, merging with craft, it's kind of impressive and amazing. And I think it hits all the different categories for me. And Brancusi's sculptures. And on the right is Isamu Noguchi's Nurse Radio, which was made in Bakelite. Noguchi was an amazing designer because he kind of spanned furniture and product and sculpture. So he's someone interesting to look up if you guys aren't familiar with him. So a product's position within this matrix is also fluid. Like these swords that you see in this image on the left as being a prosthesis, in the image on the right, and like a modern interior, they're really a kind of icon. Or the jewelry that this Maasai girl is wearing is decorative, so it's an aesthetic or iconic item. But after they've worn them for long enough, their neck atrophies and they really need them to kind of hold up their head. They're kind of rely on them. So they become kind of a prosthesis. And then, you know, what's most likely in all of your pockets right now, to me, really hits many of all the three different categories. Or a Swiss Army knife, or the Cybertruck, which one could argue is hitting all three categories because it's got a remarkable, well, when it comes out, it's going to have a remarkable amount of towing capacity, and it can seat 6, and you know, it'll probably go 500 miles on a charge. So I think that's covering a lot of the different bases. So what will your designs be? Where will they sit on this matrix? Hopefully right in the middle. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of my work. So when answering machines came on the market, they were what happened before voicemail. You probably all use voicemail now, but this was an early answering machine, and they all had like fake wood and smoked brown plastic, and then like a kind of aluminum control panel. And that was just how they all looked, no matter who made them. And they usually had 2 cassettes, one for the incoming messages and one for the outgoing message. And they were kind of an amazing breakthrough because they allowed people to not be home and not answer their phone and kind of have a certain persona that they put out on their outgoing message. And they could be a whole different person that day, but they could sound different on their outgoing message. And it was a kind of theatrical performance that relied on a machine that was sort of a miracle at the time in terms of how it impacted the culture. And so that was fascinating to me. And I wanted to design my own answering machine. And this was my answer to it. It was called the phone book answering machine. At the time, the way that we were all keeping our calendars was on a little leather book that we carried around called a Filofax, which was like a little loose leaf notebook that had like a calendar in it, and it could have other things. And so instead of having apps, you had these little sections, and they were, you know, made of paper, and you could buy them from a stationery store. And, you know, if you were into having this kind of calendar or that kind of calendar, daily or monthly or weekly or whatever, you kind of got these inserts for your Filofax. And so it seemed like a great metaphor to use for my answering machine. And at the time where I was going to grad school at a place called Cranbrook, there was a lot of experimentation going on with using metaphors in product design. And so I was fascinated with this idea of using metaphor. And the metaphor here was a kind of a paper bound, you know, leather bound book. But instead of being an actual book, it was an electronic book that had, you know, different digital functions based on which page you were on. And what the function was for these 4 buttons that you see on the left, these green buttons, was printed on the page. So it had different capabilities based on which page you were on. So it was like menued switching, but it was physical. Like you actually turned a page to go from one mode to another in the way the machine worked. And then the phone keypad was accessible from each page. And then at the same time, also the fax machine came on the market. And this is what fax machines looked like. And again, faxes were this magical thing where really for the first time in history, you could take a page of drawings or a document and you could transmit it through telephone lines instantaneously. Now, this is pretty average piece of technology for probably your guys' lifetime. But when this came out, it seemed kind of like a magical thing to me because I was editing a newsletter with somebody who was in a different state. And for us to be able to transmit a document back and forth was really convenient and fantastic. So this was my design for a fax machine. And what I was hoping to do was have it be a portable device so you could take it with you. And rather than having the scanner buried inside, a paper path inside the machine, this allows you to carry it around like this and unroll it. And the item in the upper right is the scanner, and you just kind of hand pull the scanner across the document. So in this case, there's 2 sheets of plastic inside. One of them is transparent and the other is frosted. So with the frosted one, you have a stylus and you can draw, and it sticks temporarily to the rubber behind, and it makes like a kind of a slate, kind of like what we now use iPads for, with a stylus. And then the other function is being able to put a document under the top sheet of plastic and then pull the scanner across it. And boom, it has a little thermal printer in it. So you can either print the document or transmit it or do both. And then I started getting interested in wearable technology. It seemed like the next step now that I'd kind of made a softer product. So the phone book was this rigid product. And then the manual fax machine started to become this soft, pliable product. And the next step to me seemed like, okay, how can we wear technology? And thinking about it, I realized that, we have worn technology for a long, long time. I mean, almost all of this none of this is terribly new. Like in the upper left, does anybody know what that is? That is a chastity belt. And I think all the rest of these things are obvious. Middle of the bottom is an IUD, and the X-rays of a pacemaker. So we have a tremendous amount of technology that we're already wearing. And I was really inspired by these Hans Hollein portraits of Henry VIII from 1537 and 1540, because I think that, these outfits that the nobles and the aristocratic people wore in these other eras have, to me, a lot of opportunities for embedding technology into your clothing. Like all of these jewels and all this brocade looks to me like it's ripe for becoming, worn tech. So my first venture into this was the wrist computer, which this was way before cell phones, but the idea was that you could walk around and have this sort of phone in your pocket, or really that you're wearing, with a one-handed keyboard, and it would connect you with GPS and help you with wayfinding and connect you with databases. So you could look up, like you could have a tour of a museum, or it could take you around, most anywhere, and connect you with geolocation, or even like micro geolocation, like what sculpture are you looking at a museum, and telling you about it. And then it seemed like the final frontier for me was figuring out like how to use the head or the senses, really connecting the senses with, and coming up with an alternative to the monitor and keyboard for accessing digital information. So I was thinking about this sort of wearable computer that you could sort of see you would see the world, but then superimposed on that, you would see your desktop. So this is the cyber desk. And the idea is that it uses, instead of a screen, it projects a laser beam through your pupil and makes an image on your retina, which is called retinal scanning. And it has been available really since the time that I designed this. And I mean, it's largely what they used for the Google Glass later. And so the cyber desk was this idea of really embedding everything that we do on a phone, a tablet, or a laptop in something that you can walk around with. And that is kind of an extension of you, but it's something between something that's biological and something that's an adornment, or, you know, an object of pride or display. Okay, this is a pretty simple product. It's a flashlight that has these different modes of use. So it can be an emergency light or a night light or a lantern or a flashlight. And that it has this ability to be rechargeable through cranking, like a manual crank, or being powered by the wall power. And these are all the different ways that one could use it. So it was sort of meant to be a universal flashlight and lantern, nightlight, emergency light. So it has these different functions. And then I've really loved designing stuff for animals. So I did a whole bunch of scratching posts, in attempts to make, design for animals more attractive for the modern home and sort of less of an eyesore, because, I find that a lot of pet furniture is loved by pets and kind of not loved by humans. So I've, kind of went about trying to figure out how to merge that with modern design aesthetics. This is a line of furniture that I did with a metal fabricator that I met on a project. It was all made of stainless steel rods and bent plywood. We had a lot of fun making all kinds of different little stools. These kind of wiggle around because they have foam in between the layers, so you can kind of wiggle your butt around and they move. They're called the Tuffet stools. And this is a line of lamps I made that are more like sculptures. They all use branches and fiberglass matting and fiberglass resin. This is more of that furniture. This is called the skateboard stool. Two different bases. The base on the left was sort of my first prototype, and then that was kind of too tippy. So I updated it to the one on the right. On a lot of lamps made with different materials. The lamp on the left is made with drafting mylar, actually, and an internal spring. And the ones on the right are made with Lycra, like stretchy kind of yoga pants material. This is a ceramic lounge, kind of like Color Me Mine, that has different locations in the Bay Area. And I designed all their furniture. And this is I just wanted to show you this. This was sort of a problem that they had. So people get all their art supplies to do the like painting of the ceramics with all this like sort of disorganized stuff. And they asked if I could come up with something to make them a paint kiosk or like a art supplies kiosk. So this was the proposal. And the reason it's a kiosk is that all the storage for the supplies is happening behind this. So above, it's these backlit transparencies, kind of hoping to inspire people, creatively. And then all their art supplies would be in these different, little racks. And then all the sort of extra stuff would be stored behind in kind of a closet built into it. This is an exhibit at UCLA in the architecture department at their gallery. They asked me if I would do an exhibit at their gallery, and I thought it'd be really fun to do an installation. So I made this giant piece of stretchy Lycra, and I stretched it all across the floor, and I put all of this like styrofoam below it. So it's like soft, kind of fluffy floor that's suspended. And then I created all these backlit kind of sort of stalactites and stalagmites in Lycra. And I added a soundtrack and kind of turned it into this cocoon, which was up for a month, and it was really fun. We had a few performances in there. And then I did this set for a series of performances called The Living Goddess at a theater in Silver Lake, which, so they all used this set, but they used it in different ways, and you could get on and off the stage through this opening in the center. And it was sort of like a metaphor about birth. And this was the set for a yoga video, which, you know, I kind of did this whole bunch of stretched fabric installations. So this is on set while they were filming it, and here's some footage from it. So they kind of lit it different ways at different parts of the video. And so the idea was to make it very, very peaceful and quiet and kind of not seem like you were really even on Earth. Very Zen. And now I want to just talk a little bit about some work I did for a cigar company, which was mostly branding, packaging, point of sale, and trade show environment stuff. So this was the company before I started working with them. They were presenting themselves as the kind of main part of the brand. CAO is the initials of the dad in this case, and he was working with his two kids. And these were the logos they were using, and this was the kind of style that they were putting out for their, I guess, their branding. And so I redesigned their logo to look like this. And then I added kind of this smoke to it. And this is kind of the new way that we were presenting the family, because they really wanted to keep their, I don't know, like sort of cult of personality. And this was their trade show booth before I started working with them. And these were proposals for what I suggested that they do with their trade show booth. And the idea was like, they really couldn't compete with, these Cuban brands that had a real history. So I suggested that they go modern and try a whole different approach. So they did, and this is the trade show booth being assembled, and this was its launch. And then they had this flavored line, which was not selling well. And so I redesigned their packaging to be more sort of wow. And, we kind of we could be more whimsical with this flavored line. And so this was, the concept for their trade show booth. And we came up with these characters called the Flavorettes, which would be these brand ambassadors. And the Flavorettes they already wanted to use some kind of women. The cigar world was quite a male-dominated space. And so the idea was that the Flavorettes were these kind of superheroes, and they were brand ambassadors for each of the flavors. And I was thinking that they would be a cross between the cigarette girls from the 1930s and 40s and, superheroes in a costume or in a uniform. And so I devised these uniforms, which could be ideally used for different people because they hired different people at different events, and designed all these temporary tattoos that were in the logos of the different flavors. And so they would come to events, and do temporary tattoos for guests. And it was a lot of fun for everybody. And it kind of was an icebreaker. And then for the same company, sorry, now my slides aren't advancing. This was a kind of a little booklet that they made to explain the process of producing their cigars. And this is an ashtray that I call the Cubist ashtray. And the idea is that it didn't have like that semicircular cut. It just used kind of gravity to hold the cigars in place. This is a cigar and poker set, which allows you to kind of have this ergonomic bag that carries all your supplies to the poker game. And that little pocket holds something called a humidipack, which is kind of keeps the cigars at optimal humidity. Somebody smoked one of their cigars on the Sopranos set, and they got all excited and wanted to do a line just dedicated to the Sopranos. And they asked if I would design it, the packaging for it. And so I suggested that we make it look like the trunk of a Cadillac, the packaging. Then they wanted to do a lit box that had an onboard digital hygrometer. So that's this whole series here, which is like a small and a large package for this Vision brand. And this next design is for something called a rueda, which is this hexagonal bundle of cigars that is 50 cigars, and it's they wanted to have a way to carry those because people were coming to their headquarters and taking them home, and they didn't know how to package them nicely. And hexagons are part of nature, and I'm absolutely in love with that shape. So I thought, well, these bundles are hexagonal, so let's do a kind of a hexagonal package. And this is all made of Spanish cedar, or it has Spanish cedar veneer. And it allows, it protects the rueda, and it also protects it both from being mushed and also from insects. So Spanish cedar is great for that. This is what cigar lounges looked like at the time. So this is not my design. And the client asked if, they could have a Krohn design cigar lounge. So this was our proposal for what would be an interesting cigar lounge. So what you see in the rear is a walk-in humidor, and we would also, have some kind of signature cocktails, and then just a kind of relaxing environment that would be more modern. And I was hoping, people could enjoy the cigar experience along with some kind of complimentary libation, kind of like a adult playground in a way. And then another brand came to me that was starting out, and they were wanting to call themselves Duho, and they were coming from the Dominican Republic. And so I started with their logo, and this is their packaging, or one of the packages that we did for them. And then the same people had a brand of flavored cigars. I don't know if I'm not sure if I put those in. Let's see. I just want to go back and show you. We also did an Entourage collection for CAO. When one of their cigars was smoked on the set of Entourage, they got excited about that. So this is another brand by the same people who did the flavored cigar. I think I forgot to put the picture in, but this is yet another brand called Matilda, and they wanted a brand that looked Art Nouveau, turn of the last century. And so it was based on this sort of fictional character, Matilda. And so I thought that she should be a kind of almost like nymph, like the nymph of cigars, with these cigar leaves swirling around her kind of magically. And the cigar world is very family oriented. They really like to keep their branding around their families, almost like family crests. So their name started with an S. So this is an S, and it's tobacco, and it's also meant to be a kind of naiad of tobacco. And on the bottom left is the business card that we did for them and some of their packaging. Oh, okay. Here is the flavors for Duho. They wanted these to look like almost like candy, like something yummy, and they wanted to sell them at convenience stores and AM/PM places that, on freeway rest stops. So they were going for this kind of look like it would be mints or something. And on the right, you see the bands. Sorry, these are a little mixed up. This is Matilda bands. Okay, and now this is the branding I did for a hoverboard called Mozzie that was kind of trying to refer to mosquitoes and packaging for them. And up here you see in the upper of part of this photo, you can see designs for these toy cars that I did. So a line of 5 different toy cars for little kids. And this is the packaging concept for that. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the interiors I've done. If you look at the left, this is our house before my home studio before we bought it. And on the right is when we had just finished our remodel and our trees were very little. And this is more like what it looks like now. These are all before shots. My mom looked at it and she said, "This is fine. Why are you remodeling it?" But we thought it needed remodeling. So we did a lot of tearing stuff down. And this was the front door on the left, the before, and the front door now on the right. This was what the patio looked like before we bought it. And this is the patio now. On the left is the kitchen before, and on the right is the kitchen now. We opened up these windows on the street side. These are both from the before. This is like there was a big, so the roof sloped sort of from the left to the right. So we opened that up and tore out the roof and have the roof now sloping the other direction. So this is now what the living room looks like. This is a project in Atherton up in the Bay Area. So I was the interior designer on this project. This was a ground up construction of a pavilion that a couple is using they have their offices in there. They have like 10 offices in it, and a gym, a yoga room, a gallery, and a game room, and a media room, and some guest rooms, and they can entertain up to 84 people indoors. So it was logistically a complex project and also really fun. So this wall completely opens or is completely glazed. So that's a whole series of pocket doors that like moves across that space so you're seeing like an indoor and an outdoor space completely seamlessly open right now. This is the living room. They have this amazing collection of Judaica with all these antique menorahs. So part of it was displaying the menorahs in a beautiful way and creating kind of a catalog for that. This is what one of the offices looks like. This is that living room to patio space with the glass closed. On the left is the media room. And on the right, this is a bunk room that sleeps 12. So they're like all the bottom bunks are double bed or, queen size beds. And then there are, I think, full size beds on the top. Now this is Union Editorial, which is a editing company that's on the West Side. This is what they looked like before I helped them. They wanted a kind of refresh to their look. So they had this breakout room that had a foosball table and a billiard table, and everyone ate lunch in this space. And they had that orange couch you see in the foreground is a gaming area, like a video gaming area. So I was trying to figure out, this is basically a windowless space. So how do you make it nice? How do you make it brighter? How do you make it, still fun for people to use as a breakout space? And it had this very industrial ceiling with all this ducting. So I added all these stretched fabric bits with light, and I had a 18-foot shuffleboard table made, like custom made. And then I redid the furniture for the gaming area. Then I made this wraparound banquette where people can eat and work. And this table, the shuffleboard table, is all electrified so that you can charge your devices with all these outlets underneath. And there are outlets embedded pretty much everywhere because, who doesn't need a ton of outlets? And so they eat, they drink, they work, they play shuffleboard, and it's all kind of embedded in the same space. Oh, and they have their logo in the middle of it. And a lot of people at this company were also working in the hallways, and one of them was working standing up. If you can see that little table sitting on the other tables. So I raised those up so they could work sitting down or standing up, and made a whole new set of tables for them to work at so that they can all either be seated or standing. And they can have some privacy with these kind of bookshelves. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit. I just want to end with some thoughts about where we are now with the waste stream. So, you guys are learning to be industrial designers, and we industrial designers have a responsibility because what we create has a life cycle, and it goes away, and it becomes, if it's made of plastic, it really doesn't go away. And so, it's very important for us to educate ourselves and educate our clients and everyone that we know to become more conscious of this. These are albatrosses who have eaten so much plastic that it's, a large part of their intestinal tract by the time they pass away. So what are some things that, we can all do about this? Well, we can stop using single-use plastic to the greatest extent possible. These are all filtering water bottles. The bauble, which is showing on the bottom, costs $10. The Hydros is $20. So is the Cervamate, and the Oco H2O is $30. So you really don't need to spend that much to have something that you can continue to fill and refill, and really skip all of the plastic water bottles. You can drive an electric car or a hybrid, or better yet, public transit. You can use LED light bulbs, which, that one halogen bulb uses more electricity than all of those LEDs on the right. And you can do what you can to buy post-consumer plastic items. If you have to buy plastic items, make them multiple use. And, again, lots of plastic items are now post-consumer, kind of like the way Patagonia does it. And use reusable bags when you go to the grocery store, or use Zoom like we're doing right now. So this was actually on my birthday. My class made like a happy birthday background for me. Okay, so in the way that it transforms ideas and beliefs, successful design is like alchemy. It fuses together disparate ideas from different origins so that the form of the completed product seems to embody only a single idea that comes across as so familiar that we find ourselves supposing to be exactly what we ourselves had always thought. That's from Adrian Forty in Objects of Desire. So that's an early wheel, an early lever. an early plow, printing press, one of the first automobiles, airplane, camera, telephone, computer, answering machine, like I showed earlier, and brought us to where we are now. So I just want to end with a little word about the technological singularity. The singularity was originally coined by mathematician John von Neumann, who back in the 1950s spoke of how ever-accelerating technological progress could impact human life. History is full of cases in which a new and groundbreaking technology or a collection of such technologies completely changes people's lives. The change is often so dramatic that people who have lived before the technological leap have a hard time understanding how the subsequent generations think. Singularity describes a point at which we are incapable of deciphering its exact properties. It's that place where the equations go basically nuts and make no sense. We'll get to the singularity by creating a superhuman artificial intelligence, an AI that level could conceive of ideas that no human being has thought about in the past, and will invent technological tools that will be more sophisticated and advanced than anything we have today. Since one of the roles of AI would be to improve itself and perform better, it seems pretty obvious that once we have a super intelligent AI, it will be able to create a better version of itself. And guess what? The new generation of AI will then do? That's right, improve itself even further. This kind of race would lead to an intelligence explosion and will leave old, poor us, simple biological machines that we are, far behind. So I think that it's a really interesting time that you guys are coming into the field of design, where technology, and many experts are predicting that this will happen by 2045 or 2050. So I'll leave you with that thought. And thank you so much.
A lot to think about there. Quite the both design, cultural, and technological journey there. For those of you that have joined that are not familiar with our format, I get to play kind of the James Lipton at this point, and we will run questions through the chat. So if you have not already opened up, please open up your chat window, enter in some questions for Lisa, and I get to ask them as host for the evening. And I'm actually going to start off with one of my own. In your scale of prosthesis, aesthetics, and icon, looking at some of your own professional work and knowing that professional work is not always self-generated. It has a client, it has a need. Which of the projects that either you've shown tonight or that you've worked on do you feel you were able to get a really good, strong balance of that?
Oh, wow. That's a great question and so hard. I feel like, I think with every project, I'm trying to hit all of those. I'm trying to hit, like, I don't think that any of them can really exist well on their own. Although, you know, if I were designing the cockpit of, you know, a fighter jet, I'd probably be advised to make it a prosthesis. And, you know, like a wedding gown for a celebrity would probably be good to be, you know, focusing on icon or aesthetics. But of my own work, it's hard to be objective, because I feel like if it isn't comfortable and intuitive, like in a prosthetic way, it's not succeeding at all. And if it's not fun and inspiring and feeling like kind of a get to, then then you haven't done your work with aesthetics and with icon. So I kind of think they're in a way they're a checklist. That's kind of where I'm starting to think it is, that if you can't check them all off, you kind of aren't finished.
Right. Yes. Nice way of dancing around and not giving yourself an actual answer. I love it. So you touched on your getting your master's at Cranbrook. Can you dive in a little bit, maybe where you got your undergraduate and kind of your background in that sense?
Sure. So my undergraduate, I went to Brown University, and I was very lucky to be there because Brown is practically on the same campus with RISD. And I kind of had this epiphany while I was in college that I wanted to be an industrial designer. And just by amazing luck, RISD has a really great industrial design program. And I got to walk over there and kind of talk my way into classes. It's not like it was easy, but it was doable. And they do have a cross matriculation. And they had an amazing course at the time called Draw C, which was like endurance training boot camp for drawing in perspective, taught by a gentleman named John Berenger. And it was so great. He made us do 50 drawings a day, or, and just, you got good at it. And it was that sort of, that you guys probably know, that coordination with your wrist and your arm and your paper and your pens. And, you can't just sit down and do it. It's sort of almost like a, it's muscle memory too, kind of get into perspective drawing. So that was great. So I studied art history, which really became architectural history and design history, and then studio art, which then became design stuff at RISD. And then after that, I had the amazing luck of going back to New York, where I grew up, and meeting Tucker, who you met today, Tucker V. Meister, who we did all kinds of stuff together. We edited a newsletter together, and I ended up working at Smart Design with him. And that was kind of how I got into working with Rowena Reed Costello, who was this remarkable woman who taught what I can only describe as a kind of endurance training course in three-dimensional form making and hierarchy, which I am going to be teaching next semester at Ivy Young. And I think at least one of my students is on the Zoom, Brooke. So you're going to be in that class with me. And you guys are all welcome to come to a review if you'd like. But Rowena was a master at understanding three-dimensional form. And she was basically a sculptor. But her students, who are now in their 70s, some of them, really learned a kind of three-dimensional composition that is pretty rare now when people are going right into 3D modeling. So, her exercises are in modeling clay and in wire and in thick paper. And these are great materials to, work with. They're sort of demanding, though.
I think there's her formula, especially for the time, was very much a challenging and leading edge for getting form out of exercise. Okay, we have a question about do you happen to have a favorite example of products that are designed with the end in mind? So something that you've seen that you just think this embodies life cycle.
Well, my favorite products like that are products that have another use. Like if it's a package, that it can be then co-opted to be doing something else. When I was a kid and going to camp, there was this really incredible soap dish that Clinique was making. Is Clinique still in business?
I think so,
so. Yeah. So they had this really beautiful soap dish that was made of like rigid plastic, like injection molded plastic, and it slid together. It was like a sarcophagus. And you could buy that soap once and then have that soap dish, which was really the package for it. And I don't think anyone ever threw that out. And I really think that's how we should be doing stuff, making stuff so worthwhile that it becomes used into the future. And if it doesn't have that charm or that durability, then it really should be made of degradable materials in some way. And I know that gets into really complicated issues with freshness and stuff with food. So yeah, I know it's not an easy problem, but I'm pretty sick about all the, food packaging that we're all throwing out all the time.
Absolutely. And it's made it even.
But I don't know if I've answered that question. Sorry. The question was, can I think of a great product that has the end in mind? So yes, that Clinique soap dish, definitely. Anything that, can be upcycled in some way. Although, again, like recycling is only 9% of what is put in a recycling bin actually gets recycled. And it takes a lot of water and carbon footprint to actually do recycling. So anytime we can think in terms of reuse or just keeping something out of the waste stream in the first place, like, can you go to the grocery store with your zipper bags and go get bulk stuff? And like, there's a whole art to it where you consciously avoid single-use plastic. And I think we can do it if we design for it and think about it and kind of have the infrastructure set up for it. I think we can avoid the enormous amount of plastic waste that we've been creating.
Right now. We have a student that was wondering if you could give some advice on new designers or designers just entering the field. You have some interesting ideas and have spanned a wide range of design, like the cyber deck. I'm not sure if that's desk. Yes, cyber desk. Using retinal scanner, things like that. Have you always been interested in design and technology? This is multiple questions. Sorry. Let's start with, do you have advice considering your diversity and interest in design?
Okay, so is this Lauren's question?
Yes.
Okay, so advice for new designers or designers just entering the field.
Yes, let's start with that.
I would say that it's an amazing time right now where the world is finally realizing, like, it's been like 30 years that the Union of Concerned Scientists have been trying to get everyone's attention to be more responsible. And, like the ecology movement started in the 70s, and people just continue to be wasteful and indifferent to it. And finally, now that we have like the obvious effects of global warming and climate change, people are starting to get to the table. And so this is an amazing time where a conscious designer can be, I think, really heard. And, it won't fall on deaf ears much longer. And it's really moving and incredible how the world is now adopting, electric vehicles and, the revolution in diversity and equity and Me Too, and everyone's desire to be more environmentally responsible, I think is a really great time for you guys to be emerging. And the sense that, it's okay to pay a little more for something that's, fair trade or responsibly sourced, or, done with integrity versus exploitation. So again, these are ways that the world is waking up, that it's been quite asleep for a long time. So I guess advice to designers just entering the field is, to stick to your your ideals, because I think it's a good time to be able to kind of push them through. You have some really interesting ideas and have spanned a wide range of design, like with the cyber desk, using retinal scanning, designing furniture, etc. Have you always been interested in design and technology? Yes, I've always been interested in technology. I'm a horrible geek. I love articles about everything that's on, emerging and on the way. And I love everything about the future. I like learning about it. And I'm sort of perversely interested in everything. And I think that's a good place for designers to be. It's always fun to read about what's new, what patents people are coming up with, and how things could be done in the future is a great place for designers to be curious, I think. And, the internet makes it so easy to just have it in your pocket. You can be learning about stuff, while you're waiting on a bank teller line. And, it's amazing how easy it is to research now. So, I advocate it, but I think that curiosity is what keeps you young and what keeps you excited and what kind of helps you deal with, situations that aren't perfect. I think that I can always find something that I'm learning in every situation, so I can help myself get past situations that I'm not so happy in, because I figure, well, I'm learning all of this and I'm getting better at that. And so I think that's how I've kept myself cheerful, is to be curious.
Circling back, would you suggest, because a lot of people are finally starting to listen, I think when we were in school, the idea of environmental design was kind of more of either fringe or a lot less taken seriously. It was more policy directed. But now there's tremendous amounts of competitions and the ability to self-publicize your own conceptual ideas. So getting that work out there to kind of bring in notice of how you think.
Well, I think that that's a good point, Max. Like, everybody can create a blog, can have a Twitter feed, can retweet stuff that they think is relevant. And there's such a kind of explosion of being able to kind of disseminate what you think is a worthwhile piece of information or learning or an article or a point of view. And it's sort of easier than ever to convey these things around. You don't have to go cut out a newspaper article and send it in the snail mail like my mom did. You can just like shoot somebody a link. And so I think that it is really a very moving and exciting time to learn and to share. And I think that this, like, part of this whole singularity idea is that there's like something very positive about it. And I feel like, yes, maybe human beings will be kind of left in the dust by our technological rivals, but maybe not, because the thing is that we have the hearts and the souls. And, I still haven't met a machine that can do that, that can write a poem like Wordsworth, or, a piece of music like Beethoven, or, that can do a theatrical performance like some of our favorite, actors. And so I still think that like art exists in the hands of people. And I think that we designers are practicing our own form of art. So I don't think that we're ever going to be completely obsolete. And I think that that's a good thing.
I would agree. We have a comment thanking you that it's all fascinating and a great lecture. So we have a student that says they have clients such as CAO or others push back against, have clients such as CAO or others push back against your branding advisements. They feel like it's hard enough to get clients to accept changes to their physical products, let alone their brand standards and how they would be perceived by their customers and supporters.
Yeah, that's a really great question from Nicholas. Yes, some clients are very, very set in their ways and they think they want help, but they don't. And so you have to be sort of a psychologist and a sort of mind reader a little bit, because sometimes you need to do what they're asking for as well as what you know they need or should need. So sometimes you have to work twice as hard when they aren't just fully open to what you want to do or what you think is the right direction. And then, sometimes you get lucky and you have clients that are really, really open to advice and really cooperative. But many, many, many clients, think they want something their way. And it's, it's an art to be able to communicate with them and help them see your point of view. And so it's very good to learn to pitch. So I think I used to think that was a little bit sleazy, was to pitch an idea. Like I should just be very straightforward and tell them present what I'd done and be kind of dry about it. And that pitching was kind of manipulative. But I think that you have to remember that you have the vision and they maybe don't. And so you need to kind of advocate for your vision. And so it's hard enough to have a vision, and then make something that explains the vision, and then you got to pitch it. So it's kind of good to get into the habit of kind of accepting that that's how it goes. But Max, you should answer this too.
No, I would agree. I think it also very much depends on that interaction and how you know the client. How it's a relationship. And sometimes, like all relationships, they don't work, and they're a class of personality. But if you feel like there is value in that relationship, you have to work at it, and it's give and take. I think we probably all, as professional designers, you give away those little things sometimes, and sometimes you find wins with, the grouchy bear that you didn't think was going to turn, and they fall in love with it and own it, and it becomes their new personality that to an outside person, there never was another personality, and so as a brand, once somebody takes hold of it and you've made it a part of them rather than just an extension of you, I think that probably is what I've seen, and I can only imagine with CAO. When I saw that you set up, I was like, oh my word, that's got to be a very hyper masculine brand to kind of, because the industry is nothing but masculinity.
But it's really an interesting industry. Like I really enjoy the cigar world because I don't know. I think there's a lot of psychology in design. Yeah. Like we can all agree on that, right? There's a lot of psychology in everything, right? And there's a lot of symbolism in cigars, and people smoke cigars for a lot of different reasons. Like there's the, just gourmandises, like they actually are just an aficionado and they love smoking cigars. but then they're an enormous symbol. And so there's a lot of people that are sort of using them for compensation or to be impressive or to feel more masculine. And so I started to think of it as sort of like I was always listening for like what they wanted psychologically, because really like I couldn't affect how good or not good the cigars were. All I could affect was the sort of perception. So it was really just a sort of psychological exercise. Whereas other products that I've worked on, I'm really working on like the function of it too, and like how well it operates and is how comfortable it is. Like last year, I did the design for like a neurofeedback helmet and vest, neuro and body feedback, and so there was a lot of ergonomics in that one and a lot of symbolism as well. But with packaging for something as symbolic as cigars, it's largely, what you're conveying. It's branding. And yeah, it was fun because I kind of felt like, okay, I get to look at a whole new subculture and what are their aspirations and what are their challenges and why are they doing what they're doing and what are they doing it for? And I think that these are questions that we designers ask about everything that we design, right?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of that kind of crossover with how fashion is seen as a power symbol. In that sense, the psychology of that, I think how you handled that and moved it over and maintained a symbol of power, I think is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. It was really interesting to do the flavorettes because I kind of envisioned the flavorettes as a little bit more superhero-ish, and I think they became more of a kind of sex symbol than I originally intended. And I've always felt a little odd about that. But then it was, part of it was that, how different stakeholders were looking at it. Like women were looking at them differently from men, I thought. They were sort of aspirational for women. And so that was kind of what I wanted them to be. But anyway, so it's always interesting who's gaze, who's looking at it, who's it for.
It's also interesting of how once you birth your child, if you will, of a design, it goes out in the world and becomes something of its own, and it may have a life well beyond what you expected. And it may fulfill your dreams, or it may become something completely different.
Well, I was reading recently about malls because like a lot of malls have kind of died. Like the less chic malls are kind of now like empty, crazy, weird, giant buildings, some of them. And the original guy who came up with the mall was this Austrian designer. I can't remember his name, but he kind of disavowed it at a certain point. Like there were so many malls made, and he originally had this vision that a mall was like this amazing place where you could shop, you could eat, you could have a drink, you could do some errands. It mixed commercial space with like the public square. Like he had this utopian vision of what the mall would be. And then malls just became this like huge commercial boondoggle that were everywhere. And there was a point where he was like, this isn't what I had in mind.
Have you heard the 99% Invisible podcast on that?
No.
It is fantastic. So I highly recommend, because it covers that entire subject and it sucks you in because you feel for this visionary that it ran away from him.
Yeah.
It's definitely the idea of what you showed very beginning of Frankenstein's monster. It's our own fear of what can and sometimes does run away from us when we have an amazing idea used incorrectly or not how we intended.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is something about seeing your design later in, someone else's hands if they aren't maintaining it as you intended it. It's sometimes hard to, you kind of have to say, well, it's not my thing anymore.
That's kind of the hard pill to swallow as a designer sometimes, especially when you're a designer for hire. So we have a question that's kind of an interesting professional question that also tags in that this is a first question about this because you are the first person to do this, is do you use pronouns at a professional capacity with clients, or is it mostly on Zoom? And have you found any kind of pushback or feedback, or can you just address that?
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you for that question. I, put this on my Zoom, and it's sort of the minority of people in my department who are doing it at Iovine, but I just kind of do it. I mean, I'm a cisgender female, and it's pretty obvious that I'm, a she, but I'm in solidarity with everybody who, I think we should all do it. And I think that it's just time to be out and open about how we want to be referred so that nobody has to worry or wonder. And that everybody knows that, it's okay to be who you are. And, I might not have, I might not be in I might be in like a sort of majority group in terms of gender, but I'm in all kinds of minorities in other ways. Like I might be the only person who, is my religion in my department, or I might be the only person who really strongly believes in, I'm always in some kind of minority. And so I stand for an environment where we're all comfortable expressing who we are, and we don't have to feel like we're going to be looked at differently because of who we are, what we are, or what we believe, or how we think. And I think it affects things. So I'm all for, openness. And at the moment, yeah, I am using the pronouns because I feel like it's time that we all use our pronouns. What about you guys? Does anybody feel like there's any like trepidation about doing that professionally?
I think we have quite a few students that utilize them and I've seen used in either freelancing. Is there anybody that would like to speak up and answer that they do or do not use?
I like all the cats tonight. Yeah, I see 3 cats
in the gallery.
Yeah. And I see 1 dog. I'm an enormous animal person, so.
So or somebody that says they usually use the she, her on their Zoom, but not tonight for some reason.
Oh, really?
But they use it for the Greek life community.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Which is an interesting support in that community that stereotypically, I guess I should say, tends to be very gender biased or specific in its history. So that's an interesting thing to see.
Right, to think
more progressively.
Yeah, to think of the Greek world as progressive is it's encouraging.
Yeah.
I see Emma Long has she, her. All right.
Yeah, she's the one who asked the question.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
And yeah, so Lisa, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight to help us wrap up the season before the holiday break, giving us kind of some insight and things to think about, and also an insight into your journey, and hopefully something we can aspire to be as a creative and a professional.
Well, it's been such a pleasure, Max, and students and everybody who's come. I really appreciate it. I know everyone's tired and there's a lot of holiday stuff starting. So I can't tell you how grateful I am to get to spend some time tonight with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you've had an extremely long day. I know you started early as well, and you worked right up until you got on this. So thank you very much. And we look forward to hopefully having you in person down at on campus sometime in the near future.
Great. I would love to see everyone's work. And Max, it's been a total pleasure. Max was so awesome today at my speculative design review. So I just have to repeat that you guys are very lucky to have Max as a teacher. And I hope to see you guys.
I would say that goes doubly at USC. So.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, good to see everybody. Happy holidays and good luck with your work and your careers.